Thank you, Lord Sassoon, for taking the time to talk to us today. We have heard of the scale of this initiative, the Belt and Road Initiative. It's been dubbed the project of the century by President Xi Jinping. And the way the previous panel ended was sort of the perfect segue into talking about the opportunities for European businesses, especially the UK. I was hoping that you could kick things off first by talking to us a little bit about what this all means for European businesses and how they can navigate the challenges as well as the opportunities.
Well, thank you, Sree. And I think you're absolutely right that quite a lot of what Andrew and Jean were identifying as pushback in Belt and Road, which it undoubtedly has faced over the last 3-4 years, actually increases the opportunity for European and particularly UK-based firms to participate and come up with solutions. And in fact, I'll be at the second Belt and Road Forum in Beijing, which President Xi Jinping is hosting in 3 weeks' time. And the China-Britain Business Council will be launching a rather interesting document, which is jointly sponsored by CINCA. So that's the association, the all-powerful association that binds together the Chinese construction companies. And I write a foreword in this document. I happen to have a draft of it with me now. But it is absolutely a joint document between Britain, the CBBC, and CINCA. And their first piece in this document actually sets out, in guarded languages, some of the pushback and challenges which China has faced. And essentially, it then goes on to describe, with Standard Chartered and many other firms in this room, exactly what European, UK firms bring to solving these challenges, whether they are driven by the restriction that the Chinese now have on availability of dollars, because essentially it's a dollar or international currency-backed program. There's much less resource the Chinese have, which drives them through to needing to find market-based financing solutions, as well as much better structuring of deals linked to that financing, picking up the best environmental and other standards. And incidentally, I mean, I think it's easy to run down Chinese standards. I think their basic construction standards, are very, very good. So then to come back to your question of how this translates into opportunity for European and British firms, I see actually David Sayer of KPMG in the room. There was an assessment done a couple of years ago, which looked at a typical big infrastructure project. And the assessment was that about 16 to 20% of the project cost would go in professional fees of all kinds. So financing will only be a relatively small part of that. And I think the KPMG assessment on pretty conservative assumptions about how much might flow through London was that we can easily see our way within the next 2 or 3 years to a flow of professional fees into the UK at around $2.4 billion a year. And if you gross that up, that's just assuming the UK works on a pretty small percentage of the projects that are in the pipeline. And of course, it flows from everything from companies like Arup and Atkins doing the master planning through the legal structuring that a Clifford Chance or a Linklaters do. Have to be careful about who's in the room and who isn't in the room, and many others that Standard Chartered. I mean, Jonathan wasn't giving. I didn't hear any numbers, but I know in 2017 I saw some numbers that you deployed at least $10 billion, quite apart from the $50 billion and other commitments that you've got. So it really is flowing on the financing, risk management. Companies like Jardine Lloyd Thompson, Marsh, JLT, as they are today, putting through the really challenging construction risk, the political risk we heard about going through the Lloyd's market. It's firms like KPMG, or to take a non-UK firm, Siemens, and others who are actually managing the projects, and so it goes on. So I'm very, very optimistic about the the opportunity, but infrastructure projects, always go slower than people hope they will.
So we did hear some of the geopolitical challenges navigating some of those. But in terms of what some of the structural impediments have been, what have been some of the challenges traditionally for European firms, and what might be some ways that both on the China side and on the Europe side, how can these be sort of addressed going forward?
Well, again, I think if we focus on London in particular, because that's where the action is very largely going to be, I think there are a few things in the sort of pipework that are unfinished business, and it was interesting the reference to the London-Shanghai Connect, because I do think that project will go live when there is the next high-level meeting between the Chancellor Philip Hammond and his opposite number, Vice Premier Hu Chunhua, in their annual economic and financial dialogue. So I think that will come, and it is important that, I don't know whether it's an impediment, but it will certainly ease the opportunity for financing to flow through London on these projects and many other investments. I think that it would be good to see some form of memorandum of understanding between the UK and China. This is a very controversial area, particularly because Italy has come up with this a deal of a sort that certainly the UK wouldn't enter into. But I think there is a big opportunity for UK firms to get some form of official backing by the two governments, which essentially says to Chinese contractors, energy companies, and other promoters of investments, you are safe dealing with UK and other European professional firms to help you with your projects. So I think there are a number of either impediments or certainly ways we can drive this forward, and I think we will over the next year.
In terms of some of the other issues that have come up, for instance, the debt models that are being used, how valid is the criticism that this saddles some of the smaller countries with a lot of debt, and how might we be able to address those types of skeptics who say that this isn't a really good funding model?
Well, first of all, Sree, it's completely clear that this has happened. First, secondly, I find in the last year or 18 months a refreshing recognition of that. 2 or 3 years ago, I wouldn't have expected directors, general vice ministers in Beijing to be actually openly discussing it. Now they are, which is, an important step. And I think, we could debate Sri Lanka and other cases, and, we could debate the extent to which taking on excess debt proceeded or not Belt and Road. But I think the first thing is that China does recognize that problem now, and there is quite a way to go. But I think, things are starting to happen. And again, coming back to the topic of this session and kind of where does London win out on this, there are large numbers of projects which are entirely financed by Chinese banks, which are being structured by UK professionals. So again, the banking opportunity is enormous. But I was looking, for example, at a Jordanian power project, entirely Chinese financed. It's an oil shale project, $1.2 billion. The financing led by, I think, Bank of China and ICBC. If they're in the room, they'll correct me if it wasn't them. Incidentally, the financing organised by Chinese banks out of London branches, structured by UK lawyers. So again, in terms of getting safer financing structures, even if it's purely Chinese-led financing, a lot of the work is being done already here.
And one of the we had started to talk about this, but 13 seconds wasn't a lot to discuss Brexit and the impact of how do you see sort of the status that we are in right now? How will that kind of play into the future willingness of financial firms to take risk and how is that playing into conversations?
Well, I mean, we could talk all morning about Brexit, and I don't want to get stuck on that. I mean, all I would say is that I think UK politicians have realised, in the context of Brexit, however it pans out, just how important China is to the UK's economic future. Frankly, the UK's performance in China, business performance in China a few years ago was woeful. China has gone from being the UK's 8th largest export market to, in 2011, to its 3rd largest export market. This is China as mainland plus Hong Kong, so it's gone from 8th to 3rd in 7 years. And I think that is just one measure that actually, whether it's British business or the British government, fully recognise the importance of doing business with China. China recognises that the UK has done some very important things. I mean, we shouldn't, getting back to Belt and Road, we shouldn't understate the significance of the UK being the first big Western country to sign up for membership of the AIIB. We got in there early. China very much welcomed that. From a UK perspective, it meant we had a hand in drafting the rules of that bank, and I think everything that they've done since they were launched absolutely justifies the UK's confidence. So yes, there's a lot of distraction from Brexit, but if you see through that both the Chinese commitment in London as China's primary gateway to the world's financial markets, particularly linked to London's historic relationship with Hong Kong. So the China mainland, Hong Kong, London link is something which was probably first discussed in detail in 2011 in London between then Vice Premier Wang Qishan and George Osborne. Everything I see indicates that China is very, very committed still to that link, and in the context of a global Britain and all the other things we're talking about BRI, I feel very confident.
And does the memorandum of understanding that you were alluding to earlier, is that something that you see as a very distinct possibility, given sort of this mutual recognition?
Well, this has become difficult, challenging territory. I mean, certainly the UK is not going to sign up with China to a memorandum that many countries have signed up to, which doesn't have some proper reciprocity, some proper things to work on. Now, whether a government-to-government memorandum is a realistic prospect in the short term, I don't know. But there are other representative institutions in the UK, the City of London, for example, who could sign up with potentially with Chinese official bodies. But the importance of this, I think, is that there's a lot of work going on in green financing standards and defining Belt and Road as an asset class. Lots of good work that is going on between the UK and China at the moment, which it would be very helpful to wrap up in some form of memorandum of understanding that would incorporate an ongoing multi-year work plan, but also would give this further endorsement to UK firms, which essentially says that to the Chinese promoters of these projects, it's perfectly safe to look to London for the professional input.
So this summit later this year that you will be attending, what is your expectation that what is your expectation from that summit, and what might come out of that, which might smooth the road and help create even more opportunities for businesses down the road?
I'm in a much better position to tell you about that in 4 weeks' time, but I think and expect and hope that this, after the first Belt and Road Summit in 2017, which in some senses might have been seen as the sort of high watermark of China being really on the front foot on Belt and Road, I think that the theme of this year's Belt and Road Summit will really be around some of the realization of the difficulties that come with Belt and Road, and the deeper understanding that this is a partnership venture. I mean, China has always talked in partnership terms about Belt and Road, but I think now there is a real recognition that on many of the issues that make projects fly or not fly in the international markets, China is really committed to a partnership approach, and that's what I expect to come out loud and clear from this year's summit.
Do you expect any kind of rebranding or reaffirming of the commitment to the Belt and Road, given some of the negative kind of stereotypes, if you want to call them, and some of the press that has emerged from in the past couple of years?
I don't expect a rebranding in the sense that this is a flagship policy for China. It is a multi-decade project. China sees it as absolutely central to its relationship with the world going forward. So in that sense, I don't see a rebranding, but I do, as I was saying, see them putting more flesh on the bones of what partnership means.
Excellent. Just one more question, since we are running out of time. You spoke about the London-Shanghai Connect and how that would deepen the financial relationships between the two countries. How do you see that kind of playing into the conversation for Belt and Road, apart from indeed just deepening those financial ties?
Well, I think, have we got the London Stock Exchange here? They can speak for themselves
will,
later, no doubt. And I won't do the advertising very well for them, but I do observe, the Chinese banks using London as the lead market for green financing and other financing, sophisticated financing instruments, which are absolutely going to be integral to the Belt and Road. I see the LSE launching Komodo bonds and other financing vehicles for smart countries who are going to be big recipients of Belt and Road projects. So, Indonesia and Komodo bonds. Here is a country that's in the happy position of being able to pick projects led by China or led by Japan or other countries and dishing out the projects, financing them partly through London. There will be, no doubt in future projects, Chinese elements of it which may come through Bank of China and ICBC and China Construction Bank launching bonds here on the stock exchange. So I see a sort of complex kind of web here in which the LSE is certainly going to be a major player.
Lord Sassoon, thank you so much for your thoughts today and your time. And I look forward to comparing notes in 4 weeks when you're back from Beijing.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.